It's a dash of Italy in the heart of Africa. Sunday morning in Asmara, capital of Eritrea. The Italian colonisers left 63 years ago, but the passion for La Dolce Vita remains. These Italian Art Deco streets are among the cleanest and safest in Africa. But the good life is elusive. Once Africa's youngest, most promising democracy, Eritrea is now careering down the path to dictatorship. Soldiers still wear the distinctive sandals, made famous by an earlier generation of fighters, who fought an epic 30-year war of liberation against Ethiopia, a struggle to create a unique African state, blind to tribe, religion or gender. A revolution now immortalised by this bizarre monument.
When the Eritreans joyfully declared their independence from Ethiopia back in 1993, it was heralded as the beginning of an African renaissance. But what has followed has been a decade of war, famine, drought, and more recently, political repression. For many here, this great experiment in African democracy, a dream supported by so many in the West, is now dead.
Just 20 minutes drive from the cafes of Asmara, you find a very different Eritrea. This is part of the regular circuit for Ascalu Menkerios, the hands-on Minister for Labour and Social Affairs. She's also a famed veteran of the independence struggle. Now she must stand and watch as her people are gradually reduced to this.
Almost around بنصل مالتي 14000 حساب ينقلون صقم الله ولا يكون ግን تزلو انت تقبر غورا ነገር የለም.
You know, we were distributing 20 kilos per family, but now he's telling me it's 12.5 kilos per family only per month.
So you're basically running out of supplies here?
Almost, yeah, almost.
Eritrea is in the grip of drought and will have to import 70% of its food this year.
What percentage of Eritrea's population are dependent on food aid to survive?
At this time, you know, you can say almost 2/3.
It's all such a long way from the heady days of the liberation struggle. For 3 decades, from the early 60s, Eritreans confronted the mighty Ethiopian war machine, which was backed in turn by the Americans, then the Soviets. As a young revolutionary, Ascalu Menkerios travelled abroad, capturing the imagination of high-profile Westerners, such as Australian eye surgeon Fred Hollows, who became a passionate supporter of Eritrean nationalism.
When we met him in Australia, we went to his house for lunch, and he wanted to know more about Eritrea and its people. You know, it was a hidden war for 30 years, and people like Fred Hollows were the only few friends that were really following very seriously what kind of struggle, how just cause it was.
But Fred Hollows died in 1993, the year his beloved Eritrea declared independence. What do you think Fred Hollows would make of it all if he was still alive?
I'm sure he would be very disappointed with the international community's treatment of the issue.
Eritrea asked the international community for $190 million in aid this year, but many donor nations are balking, fearing the money will be spent on weapons, not wheat.
We cannot blame God for the problems we are facing. It's all human-made or man-made. And if Ethiopia didn't invade Eritrea, we wouldn't be in this situation now.
The peace that finally settled over this land was all too brief. In 1998, barely 5 years after independence, Eritrea and Ethiopia began arguing again over ownership of Badme, an obscure town down there in the rugged border country. It remains unclear who started the shooting, but both sides stubbornly refused to back down. The fighting rapidly escalated into a 2-year bloodbath. By the time they'd fought each other to a standstill, 100,000 people were dead, and Ethiopia occupied a quarter of Eritrea. These Indian peacekeepers are part of a 4,000-strong United Nations force now on the ground, monitoring an increasingly fragile peace. They patrol part of a 25-kilometre wide buffer zone that runs the full length of the Eritrea-Ethiopia border, 1,000 kilometres of this imposing terrain. They may speak the language of diplomatic understatement, but the consequences of failure here are clear.
Sometimes tempers do run high, and that is why we are here for.
And something like 100,000 people were killed here.
You're right. In the last war, that's what the statistics speaks for itself.
Last year, an international boundary commission declared Badme and other contested areas to lie inside Eritrea, a ruling Ethiopia refuses to accept. For the moment, peacekeepers occupy the disputed territory, closely monitored by the Eritreans.
This is the region where the new boundary is supposed to cut across in a manner which is not acceptable to one party to the conflict.
This particular valley here?
This particular valley here. The extent of the area talking about is from where we are standing,
yes,
slightly down below into the valley, up to the ridge line on top.
In the few years of peace following independence, Eritrea had embarked on a remarkable infrastructure program that was the envy of the developing world. Much of it now lies in ruins.
This is Sinafe town.
Yeah.
This used to be a very, very important town before the war. Still continues to be very important.
And what happened here?
Oh, this was the telephone exchange. Unfortunately, in the war, this got destroyed. You can see it's borne the brunt of destruction.
So looks new. This was built, what, after independence?
Yes. This is, I think, if I'm not wrong, 98 vintage. And got destroyed in 2000.
Also destroyed was the vision of this man, Eritrean President Isaias Afewerki, once universally hailed as father of the nation.
Vision is one thing. Realizing vision is a completely different story.
President Isaias now leads a nation clearly on a war footing. With a population of only 4 million, a staggering 300,000 are in national service. He was a brilliant guerrilla commander during the liberation struggle. But these days, Isaias is a man with few friends left in the world, apart from Libya's Colonel Gaddafi, who donated the fighters that fly overhead on National Day. Many ruling party comrades believed the border war could have been avoided and was scathing of the president's handling of the conflict. For Isaias Afewerki, this was treachery of the highest order.
You would find treason, betrayal, vacillation, compromising national security, and a number of other things.
The celebrations now reflect the growing paranoia of the leadership. The snakes represent Eritrea's many enemies, not just Ethiopia, but the traitors within. In late 2001, with the world preoccupied by the aftermath of September 11, the president struck. Elections were cancelled, a draft constitution suspended, the free press silenced. Cabinet ministers and generals were jailed or fled into exile.
It's no politics, it had nothing to do with views, ideas, opinions, but our national security was in danger, and we had to take the appropriate measures to defend the nation and its sovereignty.
Such is the fear and paranoia here in Asmara that no Eritrean dares publicly discuss politics. The dozens of revolutionary heroes, politicians, journalists and businessmen who dared speak out and were later arrested have, for all intents and purposes, ceased to exist. To get some idea of what's really going on here behind the picturesque facade of Asmara, we need to travel abroad to meet those Eritreans who've managed to escape the regime.
For 15 long years during the struggle, Paulos Tesfagiorgis was a key administrator of the independence movement. Now, this former member of the ruling circle endures a lonely exile in the United States. He dares not return home.
I don't think I will see my country beyond the airport. I'll be arrested there. One sad thing about the way this government operates is that it can arrest people but make them to disappear, or held what's called incommunicado, no communication, nobody knows where they are. And we're talking about well-known people, prominent people, and God knows what happens to others who are not known.
Amnesty International reports that hundreds of Isaias's critics have been detained, including this man, Fesai Joshua Johannes, seen here in happier times in this 1997 Foreign Correspondent report. He established this touring youth circus to remind the next generation of the sacrifices of the struggle.
We have to teach the children. They have to keep it in mind. They have to preserve it.
A famous veteran, playwright and prominent newspaper publisher, Joshua personified the Eritrean success story.
Yes, we have done our duty. We have done our duty. This type of, yes, I believe that.
But Joshua is now among 21 prominent political leaders and journalists held without trial at a secret location. His fate was sealed after writing an open letter to the president criticising his increasingly autocratic rule.
He was among the journalists who were detained, among the journalists who went on hunger strike and taken away from prison and put where nobody knows.
You know, this material will go to ABC. It won't.
During our visit to Eritrea, Isaias was suddenly called away on a trip to Libya and Italy that, according to Western diplomatic sources, also included arms buying. But he later agreed to answer questions put to him on our behalf.
Last time ABC foreign correspondent visited Eritrea, they profiled a former fighter turned journalist and artist named Fesai Johannes, known as Joshua. Where is he now?
I don't know him.
He was co-founder of the newspaper Set It, which was the biggest newspaper here prior to being shut down.
I don't know him. I don't know.
You don't know him, or where he might be?
I don't know him. If I don't know him, how can I know where he might be?
He can afford to say that, you see, but that's his problem. He can deny and put himself in a problem because he has become incapable of facing the truth and doing the right thing.
Eritreans may be short on food, but there's an abundance of political rhetoric. State TV feeds the masses a steady diet of propaganda as the regime attempts to merge the sacrifice of the liberation struggle with the present confrontation with Ethiopia.
If you look at the propaganda, there is no tone of reconciliation. There is no tone of calming down.
Notably absent is the once vibrant, outspoken media. In Eritrea today, the state is the truth.
Why isn't there any free press in Eritrea?
What is free press?
Press which is not run by the government.
There is no free press anywhere. It's not in England, it's not in the United States. We'd like to know what free press is in the first place.
There are no elections yet. There is no free press, and you've locked up a large number of critics of the government, both politicians, generals and journalists. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, you know, basically what's said doesn't mean it's true. How do they define democracy? How does it work? You know, it's always context-based. And we cannot have, you know, imported models and, you know, frames to really fit into. There's no democracy that fits all, you know.
Amid the relative luxury of Asmara, there's an all-pervading sense of war weariness. Originally conscripted for 2 years, many young Eritreans, such as musician Johannes Tekwabo, have now been in the army for a decade.
Since 1994, I'm in military service and military fighter. It's very bad. I feel so bad about it, but if there is a war, we can't leave, you know.
Before his call-up, Johannes was one of Eritrea's most popular young singers. Today on leave, he's still instantly recognised by his many fans.
Sonia, hey, Sammy.
But celebrity counted for little when he found himself just another soldier fighting for his life.
I lost many friends and I may kill many enemies too. I got a freedman injured in my right side leg. I come back to hospital. And after that, they called me to sing here.
By day, he performs in a military propaganda band. But by night, Johannes attempts to rebuild his career. Most of the audience are, like him, urban middle-class conscripts. There is no youthful exuberance here. Too many friends and relatives are missing for that. This is Asmara's other war memorial, known locally as the Tank Cemetery. A vast resting place for the wreckage of 4 decades of conflict. Many now fear this is how the great Eritrean dream will all end, if Isaias doesn't address a growing resentment from within his own ranks.
This kind of frustration developing within the military, we don't know where it's going to, where the channel is for this frustration. It could be some kind of a coup d'etat. And this is not uncommon in Africa. Coup, counter coup, counter coup. So forget stability, forget development, and forget the rights of the people.
But the president couldn't care less what his critics think. He's the father of the nation, and as far as he's concerned, it's a job for life.
For me, retirement means retiring from what you do in life, from what you aspire to achieve in life, in a nation, and I don't think that will ever cross my mind again anytime in the future as long as I am alive.
Power became the only aim of the President of Eritrea. Power at any cost.
Out on the border, the UN peacekeepers are acutely aware that any minor shooting incident could trigger another war.
This is the end of the road, is it?
This is the end of the road.
Okay.
Beyond this, you will enter Ethiopia.
A big problem is the lack of a physical boundary here. Nomadic cattle herders from Ethiopia often wander across, accompanied by armed Ethiopian militiamen.
What happens when they come in contact with the Eritreans up in these posts here?
We don't let that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that much of a hold we have in this region, that we do not allow the two population to get in contact.
The peacekeepers' job is not being made any easier by the extraordinary outbursts of their increasingly belligerent host.
Is the UN peacekeeping force here doing a good job, or indeed a fair job, in your opinion?
I don't think they're doing any job at all.
In what sense?
There is nothing to be done here. I mean, they're not keeping peace, and there is no peace to be kept here. They live like tourists, they live like, I don't know, I mean, they have no job to do.
The long years of military service are slowly destroying youthful hopes and dreams of a better life. But Johannes is resigned to his fate. It's his country, right or wrong.
Always we are with the government, with our government, you know. We don't like it, but we don't have a choice.
For this generation, the inheritors of the so-called African Renaissance, there's very little to celebrate, except a future promising war, famine and dictatorship.